Chapter 24. The Kurosaki Family. Jiangju escorted the sulky Conan back to the hotel. It was already midday, and more guests were arriving. Guyi had arrived with Zhao Linger as well. After greeting the others, Jiangju joined Guyi. "Hello, Conan," Zhao Linger said cheerfully. She didn't know Conan was actually a high school student. She just thought he was a clever little boy who knew a lot of things. Conan gave a simple nod. "How are you, Linger?" Jiangju smiled. "Looks like the boss has done a good job recruiting someone." Guyi chuckled. "Yes, that boy lives with his guardian. To avoid worrying them, he has to pose as a cousin." Jiangju shrugged. "Next stop, we go pick up the Kurosaki family." "Are we going to meet Yuzi and Ichigo?" Zhao Linger asked, delighted. "Yep, Yuzi and Ichigo. You'll be happy to see them." Jiangju ruffled her hair and smiled. Then he gathered Zhao Linger and Conan and led them away. "He really likes kids," Guyi remarked, watching them go. Xiao He thought to himself quietly, "He loves children, but it's a pity he can't have any of his own." On the other side of the city, after passing through the barrier gate, Jiangju and the three children arrived in a residential neighborhood that retained a Japanese architectural flavor. No surprise, since they were heading to the Kurosaki home. Jiangju checked his phone the way he had before and found the map pinned to Kurosaki Hospital, so it looked like the family was at home for the lunch hour. "Then let's go straight there." He hailed a taxi and gave the address. Their driver was a taciturn man. Apart from the seatbelt reminder and a quick question about their destination when they got in, he kept quiet. Zhao Linger chattered away, and Conan listened more than he spoke. About 10 minutes later, the driver spoke up again. "We're here." Jiangju paid and led the children to the residential building associated with Kurosaki Hospital. Since it was exactly noon, Mrs. Kurosaki and Ishin Kurosaki were both at home, eating in the living room. "Hello? Is something wrong? Any emergencies?" Mrs. Kurosaki asked with concern as they rang the bell. "Hello, Mrs. Kurosaki. We've spoken before. I'm Jiangju from the Hogwarts tour group," Jiangju said with a practiced smile. "These two are part of our little group, companions for three children." He'd prepared for this visit. In contrast to the way he'd just shown up at Conan's place without warning, Jiangju had spent days phoning Mrs. Kurosaki and Ishin, persuading them little by little. After a lot of coaxing, they had agreed to bring their children over so the parents would see for themselves that the tour was legitimate. He'd also told Mrs. Kurosaki that Conan was a distant relative, which had eased her worries. Conan's maturity and intelligence helped win her trust as well. Conan and Zhao Linger greeted politely. "Hello, Kurosaki. I'm Zhao Linger," Conan added in a low voice. "Edogawa Conan. Sorry to trouble you." "Oh, you're the kids Yozi and Shiali always talk about," Mrs. Kurosaki said, smiling. She relaxed and welcomed them inside. The group's little hideout wasn't exactly some big secret, but to the children it was a private, cherished world they didn't like to share with adults. Still, the Kurosaki kids, excited at the arrival of old friends, ran up to Conan and Zhao Linger and pulled them into the house. In the living room, Ishin and Mrs. Kurosaki asked Jiangju for details about the trip. He laid out documents, explained the itinerary, and spoke about giving children a chance to see new things and have a magical, memorable childhood. His reassurances, presented with calm confidence and a few official-looking papers, melted much of the parents' hesitation. The more Jiangju spoke, the more Mrs. Kurosaki and Ishin softened. He couldn't help but think it had been a bit of work to win them over. Still, the easy warmth of the Kurosaki family made him feel unexpectedly comfortable. "When do you leave?" Ishin asked. "We'll gather today and depart tomorrow morning," Jiangju replied. "Don't worry, I'll make sure the kids call you when we arrive, or keep in touch via video calls. We're professionals, we'll handle the homesickness if it comes up." "That's my worry, the kids missing us and crying," Mrs. Kurosaki fretted. "We'll take care of it," Jiangju assured them confidently, the posture of a seasoned actor used to calming anxious parents. In the end, although they were reluctant to let their children go, the parents packed luggage and accepted the plan. The children were already lost in fantasies about the magical world they would visit. Conan, calmer than the rest, came up to Jiangju and asked quietly, "Boss Jiang, where are we going from here? You said you were from a Hogwarts tour. Where's our car?" Jiangju looked entirely unruffled, smiling like an easygoing old friend. With a small gesture, an almost theatrical flourish, he led them outside. Parked not far away was a compact, tasteful RV with Hogwarts Tour Group painted on its side in elegant red letters. Conan suppressed a smile. Seeing the vehicle, he chuckled inwardly. A little showiness, he thought, but it worked. Chapter 25, Hogwarts Travels, Departure. On the second floor of a ramshackle tavern, 5 children filled one small room. The red panda, Xiaohei especially, fussed and squirmed in the arms of Kurosaki Yuzu. The girls chattered incessantly while Ichigo and Conan were busy with a game on the table. "Kids, it's late. We need to leave early tomorrow. Time for bed," Jiangju said as he came in from outside. He paused, watching them still laughing and playing, and felt a little sheepish. He'd overestimated how quickly they'd settle down. "But boss, what's that world like?" Zhao Linger asked with wide-eyed curiosity. "Isn't it like ours?" "It's similar," Jiangju replied. "It's London, 1991. Zhao Linger, who had studied modern history and picked up a fair amount of modern knowledge in this world, knew more about such things than most of the others, except for one precocious child who knew even more. The children had never seen anything truly magical before, and excitement made them restless. Getting them to sleep proved harder than he'd expected. In the end, Jiangju resorted to a gentle method that wouldn't harm them, just a soft sleep charm. Conan, who had been far too energetic, grumbled when his eyelids grew heavy. "Is that what you call a professional method?" he said, annoyed. "You forgot you're still a mischievous kid," Jiangju teased. He snapped his fingers. Before Conan could finish his retort, the boy's head lolled, and he was asleep. "Perfect. Very professional," Xiaohei chirped, wriggling free of Yuzu's arms. A few moments later, the red panda yawned and promptly dozed off too. Jiangju snorted, then reached out. Quilts flew silently through the air to cover the sleeping children. He turned off the lights and went to his own room. The house quieted down for the night. Morning came early. After he prepared breakfast, the children drifted awake one by one. Kurosaki Yuzu and Kurosaki Karin blinked blearily at each other, disoriented for a moment before remembering where they were. Zhao Linger, who had already washed and dressed, came out of the bathroom with a tiny frown when she saw the others. "Okay, everyone, wash up and come eat," Jiangju called cheerfully from the bedroom doorway. "I don't know how to put my clothes on," Yuzu admitted, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Karen had her shirt on backwards. Zhao Linger, having dressed earlier, assumed the others had done the same and offered no help. After all, she was still a child herself. Jiangju shrugged and smiled. He was going to be daddy again for the morning. He remembered, dimly, caring for his brother during a break, memories of looking after children. "Don't worry, I'll help," he said. He could have used magic to fix everything in an instant, but instead he fussed over them himself. He buttoned Yuzu's shirt, straightened Karen's collar, and asked with a grin, "Who's this pretty princess?" The 2 girls giggled. Zhao Linger watched, a little twinkle of jealousy in her eyes. Jiangju noticed the small rivalry and went over to help her too. He wasn't good at girls' hairstyles, so he opened Baidu and picked a simple, pretty style for Zhao Linger. The girl beamed when he finished. "I never thought you'd do this," Conan said in surprise when he joined them. After all, to him Jiangju had always been a formidable, almost godlike presence. "I like kids," Jiangju answered, rapping Conan lightly on the head. "That doesn't include a naughty one like you. Come on." Breakfast. "It's nice being around kids. I feel years younger," Jiangju said with a smile as he picked up Xiaohei, who had just woken and was rubbing his eyes. He tousled the panda's fur and led the way into the living room. The children sat politely at the table. Although bowls of porridge and several tempting snacks were set out, they waited for Jiangju to take his seat. When he did, the younger ones, loud and exuberant, shouted, "We can start," and dug in. Jiangju and Zhao Linger ate more quietly, and the whole room felt warm and bright that morning. After the meal, Jiangju used a small cleaning charm to sort the dishes. The children watched with wide, approving eyes. He then led them out into the tavern's common area, placing Xiaohei in charge of watching the place before opening the boundary gate. In the blink of an eye, they were no longer in the cozy tavern, but standing on a grimy, narrow street. The air was stale and filled with the sour tang of rot. Passersby didn't notice the sudden appearance of the group. To ordinary Londoners, this stretch of alley was nothing but refuse and derelict buildings. "Where are we?" Conan asked, pinching his nose. The smell made him wince. "Not what I expected," Jiangju muttered. He pointed ahead. "That's the Leaky Cauldron. It's famous in this world." Conan frowned. "I can't believe what looked like a pile of trash just now is a bar." "That's because muggles, people without magic, can't see it," Jiangju explained. "Only someone with magical perception can notice places like this. Linger's learning magic, so she can see it. What about Ichigo and the others? Can they see it too?" Conan asked, glancing at the group. Ichigo was already the first to pick out the strange, out-of-place building and began walking toward the entrance, fascinated by the sight. "They have something like spiritual energy," Jiangju said, lowering his voice. "The three of them have significant spiritual power in their bodies. They may not know how to use it yet, but Ichigo should be able to sense the place now." "Ha, so I'm the only ordinary one?" Conan said, sounding a little put out. "You? Ordinary?" Jiangju laughed. "Don't be ridiculous. You have to be aware of who you are. You're practically a walking god of death." Before they could argue further, Jiangju noticed a few people nearby who had begun to look their way. "Those guys have noticed us," he said. A young man and several children were watching, curious, likely thinking of coming here to spend the evening. Conan rolled his eyes, scanned the street, and said to Jiangju, "Looks like we've been spotted. Shall we go in?" Chapter 26. The Wizarding World. The Leaky Cauldron was a kind of shrine for anyone visiting the world of Harry Potter, especially for muggles who were meeting the wizarding world for the first time. Jiangju pushed open the door with 5 children in tow and immediately noticed a cluster of wizards dressed in outdated clothes, loudly talking and drinking. The room fell quiet when those few young people entered. "Excuse me, who are you here for? Where are your parents?" called a middle-aged man from behind the counter, his clothes and rag as worn as his face. "They're on their way to Hogwarts. Tom, you can leave this to me." A clear, authoritative voice answered. A tall woman in a dark green robe stood up and walked over, square glasses, tightly pinned black hair. "Minerva McGonagall, Transfiguration teacher at Hogwarts," she introduced herself, staring at the children before fixing her gaze on Jiangju. "Professor Dumbledore sent me to collect you." "Professor McGonagall, hello. I'm Jiangju," he said, smiling, and introduced the children. "This place isn't really suitable. Let's head to Diagon Alley. Professor Dumbledore asked me to show them around." McGonagall had refused at first. As head of Gryffindor, she bristled at the idea of leaving such a job in the hands of a young-looking stranger. Dumbledore, however, had told her that the boy wasn't what he seemed, an ancient and enigmatic wizard from the East. That was enough to make her take the summons seriously. But all doubts melted away when she looked at Jiangju. She couldn't sense any magic from him. That was something she had only seen from a very small number of people in her life, people like Dumbledore. Even stranger, he looked like a teenager. There were those in the magical world who lived unnaturally long, but most of them did not carry such a youthful, almost unnatural appearance. McGonagall felt unsettled in a way she could not easily explain. Ichigo and the other children were a little afraid of the strange wizards around them and remained quiet until they reached the back of the Leaky Cauldron. Behind the pub, where there were only trash cans and patches of weeds, a section of brickwork hid the entrance to Diagon Alley. Jiangju explained the trick. Count 3 bricks up from the bin, 2 across, then tap 3 times with your wand. The bricks would shift, a small hole would open, and then the gap would widen into an archway. "Stand here for a photo," Jiangju said, spotting the entrance as its own kind of attraction. He asked Conan to stand with the children, lifted a camera into the air, and snapped the picture as it hovered. McGonagall watched without interfering. She didn't understand why this mysterious Eastern wizard would be so taken with taking a photograph of an alleyway entrance, but she couldn't help being impressed by the children, especially the little girl at the end of the line with beautiful hair. The amount of magic in that child's presence outshone what she'd expect from even a 7th-year Hogwarts student. "Professor McGonagall, do you want to be in the picture?" Jiangju asked, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the expectant faces around her, all but one with indifferent, deadpan expressions, and smiled. Jiangju asked her to stand beside him. The children gathered around, and the floating camera captured the moment. McGonagall's observation of Jiangju only deepened. The quiet, wandless style of his magic suggested someone with considerable power. "Now, into Diagon Alley," Jiangju said, tucking the camera away. The children, already buzzing with curiosity, hurried after him. McGonagall kept her role. She would introduce them to the basics of the wizarding world, knowing these children had never seen European magic before. "In your part of the world, do children that young already begin at magic schools?" she asked as they walked. "No," Jiangju replied with a half-smile. "Professor Dumbledore invited me to bring these children along so they can get to know the magical world ahead of time." McGonagall asked a few more practical questions, which Jiangju answered casually, and then turned her attention to looking after the group. Diagon Alley was bustling with witches and wizards, but that didn't mean there weren't dangers about. McGonagall's vigilance never slept. Dumbledore had already provided galleons for them, so there was no need to visit Gringotts. Under McGonagall's guidance, they had robes made to measure, ogled magical creatures and flying brooms, and explored all manner of curious shops. Lunchtime brought them to a small restaurant lining the alley. Much of the food felt familiar to Jiangju. Muggle and wizarding fare overlapped, but perhaps thanks to a touch of magic, some of the dishes tasted better than he would have expected. He decided his impression of British wizarding cuisine might be unfairly influenced by novelty. They spent the day touring Diagon Alley, but Jiangju didn't run into any of the famous faces from the stories. No sight of the celebrated characters, not even the boy he was most curious about. It was a small disappointment, but the children's excitement kept him smiling. "It's getting late. Let's head back. The children must be tired," Jiangju said at last, watching their faces grow weary despite their earlier enthusiasm. McGonagall, having learned that Jiangju had the financial means to be more comfortable, did not insist on returning to the Leaky Cauldron. "I'll take you all to a better inn," she said. "The Leaky Cauldron isn't really suitable for you lot." "That's very kind of you. I've kept you company enough today. I'll be taking the children to the Hogwarts Express tomorrow, so you don't have to escort us then. Your time is limited at the start of term." Jiangju bowed lightly. "Have a good rest, then," McGonagall replied with a slight nod. "Professor Dumbledore will be here to meet you tomorrow." She had to get back to her duties. The start of the term would leave her busy. Jiangju and the children settled in for the night, readying themselves for the next day's journey to Hogwarts and whatever further mysteries the wizarding world had in store. Chapter 27, Hogwarts Travels. Train early the next morning, Jiangju led the children out of Diagon Alley and back to the New York train station. He had the tickets Dumbledore had arranged, so boarding was no problem, although for Jiangju, riding the train was mostly about the experience. Conan studied his ticket with mild curiosity. "Platform 9 3/4, he said. "Wizards really are odd sometimes. Calling non-magical people muggles, there's an attitude in that word. A lot of things in the wizarding world feel designed to set them apart from ordinary humans." Jiangju shrugged. "Maybe. Still, are you sure you want to do the wall trick?" Conan squinted at the solid barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Why doesn't anyone here notice it?" "Same reason they didn't notice the bar yesterday," Jiangju explained. "There are confusion charms and muggle repelling spells. Mundanes can't see it." He looked at the children and smiled. "Anyway, we can see the wizarding train in a moment. It's nothing like the high-tech stuff you're used to, but it's part of the experience." The kids brightened. Mystery always had its pull. Conan, inwardly, found someone more fascinated than himself, Jiangju. The man's quiet delight in this world was unmistakable. "All right, Conan, as the brave one, show everyone how it's done," Jiangju said, amused. Conan blinked, a little put on the spot, and before he could protest, Jiangju gave him a gentle push. Conan vanished into the wall as if through a door. "See? Nothing to it," Jiangju smiled, then slipped through with the children at his heels. The wall was a gateway, not a barrier, and the moment they passed it, the platform opened into a small, bustling world of trolleys, trunks, and hurrying witches and wizards. The Hogwarts Express, an old, gleaming red train, was waiting, steam curling around its funnel. "This is primitive," Conan observed, looking the locomotive over. "I would have thought something more like a flying carpet or at least a sleek vehicle. Human tech has sort of left them behind in places." "If you haven't seen what magic can do, don't judge too quickly," Jiangju replied. "Magic and technology are different tools. For ordinary people, the wizarding world doesn't exist at all. They're not easily compared." They made their way to a compartment reserved for teachers. Dumbledore had booked a seat for them, and Jiangju, anticipating the children's restlessness, bought snacks and a few books to keep them entertained. It didn't take long for them to attract attention. A young man traveling with 5 children didn't fit anyone's image of a Hogwarts student. Being in the professor's carriage made them even more conspicuous. Whispers spread. Old students and parents speculated. Heirs of an ancient family, foreign wizards, or aristocrats from Eastern Europe. Someone even suggested a noble family destined for Hogwarts. The carriage hummed with theory after theory. "Gossip really is a favorite pastime of every intelligent species," Jiangju murmured, shaking his head. "Are you eavesdropping again?" Conan asked, looking up from a book. Jiangju ruffled Conan's hair. "You're impossible." Conan scowled in a way that was more theatrical than angry, and Jiangju found himself oddly pleased. Once the train glided out of the station and picked up speed, the ride proved subtle, but unmistakably magical, smooth and fast without the jolt and noise ordinary high-speed trains had. It was quiet comfort wrapped in old-world charm. "I want to see the observation carriage," Ichigo announced suddenly, his eyes bright. He carefully closed the animated picture book in his lap, one of the magical items Jiangju had picked up, and looked at Conan. "Can we go?" "Sure," Conan said. Children cooed and volunteered. Kurosaki Kari and Kurosaki Yuzi put their hands up, eager not to be left behind. Zhao Linger, who had seemed so composed at Diagon Alley, looked at Jiangju hesitantly. The loss of her old privileges still showed in small ways. "Won't it bother you, brother in charge?" she asked quietly. "Of course you can go," Jiangju said, touching her head. "If anything happens, use what I taught you." Before they left the apartment that morning, Jiangju had quietly cast protective spells on each child. They were shields built with a balance, defensive, but with a controlled means of counterattack should they be threatened. The spells were tailored to their ages and natures, stronger than whatever they might face, yet restrained, so they wouldn't harm others by accident. Reassured, the children hurried off to explore the train, their small voices and light feet barely muffled by the carpet. Conan, keeping a careful eye on them, amused himself by enhancing his comic. He used a trick to make the illustrations move and settled down to read. Even from his seat, he watched the small group ducking in and out of sight through the corridor. Jiangju watched them go, a flicker of concern crossing his face. The wizarding world was enchanting, but it had its own rules and people. Not everyone liked noise, and not everyone was fond of kids, especially ones who behaved oddly by wizarding standards. He made a mental note to stay close. Curiosity was a wonderful thing, but in a place like this, it paid to be cautious. Chapter 28, Children's Adventures. "Hey, you can't run around like this. It's dangerous." A young woman in a black robe looked down at the cluster of children with a fond smile. "Sorry, we're just a little excited," Conan replied, pitching his voice up to sound as cute as possible. "Sister, you're so beautiful. Are you a witch too?" The woman laughed and crouched to their level, ruffling Conan's hair. "You're adorable. I feel like I've seen you before. Where's that person you're with?" "He's reading," Ichigo said quickly as he watched the woman touch Conan's head. "Brother Jiangju was reading a book, so we came out because we were bored. You can't run around like this. You could get hurt." The woman seemed genuinely fond of children. She patted Ichigo's head too and smiled at his flushed face. "Nah, nothing will happen to us," Yuzi declared proudly. "We're very strong." Conan went speechless. The boastful tone reminded him of the brash teams he'd encountered in his own world. Bragging never looked good. He also couldn't understand why Kurosaki, who normally appeared sharp and sensible, suddenly acted oddly. Still, the woman clearly wasn't taking their chatter too seriously. She invited them into her compartment to chat a little while. Even with Conan there, She picked up little details about the children. Good. Jiangju had warned them not to mention they were from another world or anything about the ordinary world. They'd kept that secret so far. So it was Dumbledore who invited you? The woman said in surprise, which made sense to the children. Conan frowned. You didn't tell us your name yet. Oh, sorry. I'm Angelina. Angelina Johnson. I'm in Gryffindor. She smiled. Gryffindor? What's that? Kurosaki Yuko asked, curious. Didn't Brother Jiangju tell you yesterday? Hogwarts has 4 houses. Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Slytherin. Zhao Linger answered, sounding a little disappointed that the explanation was necessary. A little girl cocked her head, utterly cute, as she tried to remember what Jiangju had said. Unfortunately for her, only Angelina found that expression irresistible. They were still talking when 2 boys who looked exactly alike strolled in. Whispers ran through the carriage at once. If they hadn't already announced they were twins, everyone would have assumed magic. One introduced himself as Fred Weasley and the other as George Weasley. Both were third-year Gryffindors, just like Angelina. By now, the whole train seemed to be talking about Harry Potter, the boy who had supposedly saved the world, and about the mysterious Jiangju and his little band. Conan tilted his head. Harry Potter? Who is he? He's a boy. Angelina corrected gently. People think he's a very great person. I'm one of those people. He saved the world, after all. The children were all intrigued and wanted to go see him in person. Angelina and the Weasley twins didn't discourage them, but they did hesitate. As third-year students, it would look strange for them to be wandering through the first year's compartments. First years had only just boarded and weren't used to the castle yet, so Angelina told the kids which carriage Harry was in and told them to go on their own. Conan was pulled along by the others. He wasn't fragile. His body might look young now, but he was still stronger than ordinary children, so he didn't complain. He only wondered when the bizarre adventure would ever end. The train looked small from the outside, but inside it seemed to stretch on and on. The kids ran for more than 10 minutes before they reached the carriage where most of the first years were housed. Once there, they found themselves stumped. How exactly did they find Harry Potter's compartment among the many closed doors and sleeping first years? Let's go back. We've been out long enough, Ichigo said, glancing toward the private rooms and the shut doors. Almost none of the first years had come out. Are you giving up already? No one respects a man who runs away when things get hard, Kurosaki Kari said, trying to sound stern. Shh! Who cares? One of the boys muttered. Boys often had no sense of subtlety when it came to pride. He still smarted a little from the earlier scuffle with Conan. He hadn't liked that the young woman reached out to Conan, but not to him. Conan sighed. Looking after children was a lot of work. Zhao Linger, however, was already cheering Ichigo on. Don't give up. Xiaoyao's my favorite brother because he never gives up. Who's brother Xiaoyao? Kurosaki Yuzi asked. He's a big brother who promised to meet me in 10 years, Zhao Linger said, fingering the necklace at her throat. A small stone hung there. Li Xiaoyao had once given it to her. Jiangju had told her that if the stone's sentiment was true, it would grow and blossom. She believed in Xiaoyao and she trusted Jiangju. They wouldn't deceive her. How long? 10 years. That's a long time, Kurosaki Yuzi said, peering at the necklace. She'd seen Zhao Linger clutch it to her chest before and wondered aloud why Xiaoyao didn't just show up now. Maybe he's busy, Zhao Linger answered simply. She knew some modern things, but not everything. She didn't know, for instance, that the Li Xiaoyao she remembered had disappeared. Conan listened to their little conversation and felt that kids these days were certainly precocious. Come on, let's go, he urged. They hurried to a car and knocked at one of the doors. When it opened, Conan stepped in and asked straight away, Hello, do you know where Harry Potter is? 3 students were inside. Conan watched them carefully. The boy sitting on the left caught his eye first. Pale skin, a tapered chin, pale blonde hair and gray eyes. From the way the other 2 seemed to hang back around him, Conan guessed he was the leader and the others his followers. Chapter 29. Hogwarts Travels. Draco Malfoy lounged in a compartment with Crabbe and Goyle, his tone smug as he told an exaggerated story about once almost colliding with a Muggle airplane while riding a broom, how, he claimed, his brilliant Quidditch talent had prevented a crash. He smirked as he spoke. A knock interrupted him. The door opened, and a group of children stepped in. Harry Potter? I heard she's in this carriage, Draco said, arching an eyebrow. Who are you? We're wizards from the East, Conan replied. We were invited by Professor Dumbledore to speak with you. Conan studied Draco carefully. The boy looked haughty and spoilt, someone not easy to get along with. Draco introduced himself with a practiced air. I'm Draco Malfoy of the Malfoy family. These are Crabbe and Goyle. He tilted his chin. Are you purebloods as well? Conan blinked. In his culture, there were no such divisions. Among the 5 children with him, none would call themselves wizards in the same sense, and the idea of pure blood was meaningless. He answered simply, Pure blood? What's that? Draco looked genuinely shocked. You don't even know. It means both parents are from wizarding families. In the East, we don't make those distinctions, Conan said quietly. We treat everyone the same. Draco's composure snapped. Well then, off you go. You're disturbing my rest. His tone turned sharp. If he hadn't remembered that Dumbledore might have invited them, he would have been ruder. Let's go find Harry and ignore this vampire, Kurosaki Ichigo snorted to the others. Vampire? Draco bristled. No one had ever dared call him that. My name is Draco, not Dracula. Conan rolled his eyes and, before Draco could recover his temper, led the children out of the compartment. Draco stayed behind, livid and held back by Crabbe and Goyle. If he had made a scene, it would have brought shame on the Malfoy name, but in the end, it would be Crabbe and Goyle who were punished. As they walked, Conan took the chance to give the children a small lesson. You shouldn't say you dislike someone directly to their face, he told them. It wasn't polite. Why not? Kurosaki Yuzi frowned. Isn't hiding your feelings hypocrisy? Adults' world is complicated, Conan shrugged. Sometimes you have to be careful with words. We're not adults, Ichigo protested. My mother says you should be clear about what you love and hate. You shouldn't be a hypocrite. I think you're wrong, Conan. Conan was silent for a moment, amused and resigned. Children saw the world simply. Once people grew up, they bowed under pressures that forced them to act in ways children couldn't understand. He decided not to push the point. Forget it. Let's keep looking for Harry Potter. They went from compartment to compartment, knocking and asking if anyone had seen the famous Harry Potter. Eventually, they met a girl with bushy, thick, curly hair and prominent front teeth. Do you know where Harry Potter is? Conan put on his most charming expression. Harry Potter? Yes, she's over there, sitting alone in a compartment, the girl said. Why are you looking for her? And who are you? I don't remember anyone else on the train. We were invited by Professor Dumbledore, Conan answered smoothly. We're wizards from the East. We heard you might be a sort of savior, so we're curious. The curly-haired girl shrugged. Okay, she's right over there, but be careful, she seems a bit troubled. She offered a name. By the way, I'm Hermione Granger. I'm a new student today. Conan, Ichigo, Yuzi, Xie and Zhao Linger, Conan introduced his little group. Xie stepped forward, curious. Are you looking for something, Hermione? You were fidgeting just now. Yes, Hermione said, looking embarrassed. I'm looking for a toad. His name is, well, I think it's Lifu. Have you seen him? A toad? Gross. Why would you look for that? Xie made a face, half startled and half frightened. He was a student's pet and got lost. I'm trying to help find him. Hermione's voice held the practical, earnest tone Conan remembered from school books. She'd been afraid of toads as a child, too, but later, through the practicalities and pranks of school life, she'd learned to ignore their ugliness. Xie closed her eyes and concentrated. Here comes the blessing, she cried. As if answering her, a toad suddenly flew through the air and landed with an unhappy plop. Xie recoiled in terror and began to cry. Conan quickly cast a levitation charm, catching the toad midair, and passed it without ceremony to Hermione. Hermione's eyes widened at the children's magic, impressed despite her shock. She tucked the toad under her arm and knelt to comfort Xie. It's okay, Xie. Conan stopped him. Toads may look ugly, but they're not dangerous. She wiped away the little girl's tears with gentleness. Yuzi and Zhao Linger squeezed Xie's hands and whispered soothing words. When Xie stopped crying, Hermione smiled. The children around her seemed genuinely kind. She thought herself lucky to have friends like that. Go find Harry Potter now, Hermione said, smiling. I think the train will be arriving at the station soon. Once you see her, come straight back. It'll save your teacher a lot of worry." Conan had his own thought. Dumbledore would probably be watching the whole time anyway. He kept that to himself, nodded, and hurried the group toward the compartment Hermione had pointed out. They knocked, and when invited in, found Harry Potter alone. She wore the Hogwarts uniform. Her hair, short, dark, and a little messy, framed an almond-shaped face with bright green eyes and round, black-rimmed glasses. At a glance, she could have been mistaken for a boy. Harry looked up at the sudden crowd of children with puzzlement. "What do you want?" she asked, guarded. "Are you Sister Harry Potter?" Yuko Kurosaki asked, unabashed and blunt. "You're so pretty, prettier than my mother." "But my mother is still prettier," Ichigo shot back, immediately defending his mother. Harry had long ago stopped caring about flattery. She'd always felt unlucky. Her parents had died when she was small, and she'd been relegated to a life with her cruel aunt and uncle. Even her long hair had been cut short by their hand. Then, on her 11th birthday, everything changed. The truth about her parents came out, the magical world opened up, and she was invited to attend Hogwarts. People hailed her as a famous figure. Some even believed she had somehow defeated a dreadful enemy. None of that felt real to Harry. She knew she was powerless. If anyone had defeated that dark threat, it had been her parents, not her. The sudden attention felt like being put under a microscope. She disliked being watched like an exhibit and had driven off the earlier intruders with cold words. Now, faced with this small, earnest company of children, she didn't quite know what to make of them. Conan, unfazed, answered her question at last. "Yes, we're wizards from the East. We heard about you on the train, and we're curious, so we came to see you." Chapter 30. Arrival. For a while, the children's laughter and bright faces made Harley forget the darker things that had been haunting her. When Conan spoke in his usual deadpan, analyzing her situation, she felt like he was teasing her, and she answered in kind. "What about you? Aren't you interested in me, someone who survived the catastrophe?" she asked, smiling. Conan's expression stayed calm. "From what I can tell, you aren't really a survivor in the usual sense," he said quietly. "You're more like a parent who gave everything for their children." Even as a child, Conan's mind picked up clues others missed. He couldn't fully understand everything that had happened, but he could see that the story wasn't about a miracle survival so much as a sacrifice. Harley fell silent for a moment, then felt a little ridiculous. People treated her as if she were some figure of myth, someone powerful enough to stand against Voldemort, the name even some dared not speak aloud. The irony stung. She wondered, with a bitter curl of thought, was Voldemort really that powerful? "Hey, what are you thinking about, sis? Did Conan make you mad?" Kurosaki Kari asked, noticing the distant look and admiring how cool Harley's short hair made her seem. "It's nothing," Harley said, forcing a smile. "Conan didn't make me mad. I just remembered something. But don't look at me like I'm some impossibly different person. I'm just ordinary, like you." "You are a hero," Kurosaki Ichigo said wistfully. "One day I'll be a hero too." "You will," Harley said, laughing. Ichigo's face lit up at the encouragement. Harley let herself be caught up in the children's happiness. For the moment, she pushed aside doubts about the future. After all, life had to be lived. She took out snacks she had bought earlier and passed them around. The children also offered what they had. Even small, identical treats tasted better when shared. Time flew, and before long, the train was pulling into the Hogwarts station. Then, as if waking from a shared daydream, the children remembered they had left Jiangju alone in the professor's carriage. "He can find us," Conan said calmly. "Don't worry. Maybe when we step off the train, we'll see him." "But what if he thinks we were rude?" Ichigo fretted. "He won't," Conan shrugged. "If he has to sleep, he'll take advantage of the chance." He offered a confident smile. "When the train stops, I'll take you to find your teacher." Harley felt a pang of guilt. She had been among those who forgot him. Still, the train came to a halt and they stepped out together. Hagrid, who had been there to meet them earlier, gave Harley a conspiratorial wink. Having at least one friendly face in this strange place eased her. "Brother Jiangju," Zhao Linger's voice called, drawing Harley's attention. Nearby, a man in a plain muggle suit stood smiling like sunlight, easygoing and familiar. "Is he your teacher?" Harley asked Conan. Yes, Conan nodded. Come on, let's go. They hurried over. Zhao Linger and the others were apologizing to Jiangju for leaving him in the carriage, but he laughed it off. He had seen everything, just as Conan had predicted. He wasn't worried about the children's safety. Miss Harry Potter, thank you for taking care of the children for me, Jiangju said with a warm smile, addressing Harley. Harley felt her cheeks flush. Jiangju's words were easy and kind, and he had a way of making her feel small and seen at the same time. He complimented her, her fiery red hair, her bright eyes, and Harley suppressed an embarrassed smile. Even Snape, Jiangju teased silently, would be impressed. It's nothing, Harley stammered. They made me very happy. It's almost time to gather. I should go. She hurried away, leaving the others puzzled for a moment. No one minded. Jiangju had already spotted Dumbledore standing a little apart and gently led the children over. An invisibility cloak hid his sudden approach, so nobody else noticed. If I hadn't gotten your message just as we were getting off the bus, I would have thought you were worried about Miss Potter, Jiangju said to Dumbledore with a faint smile as he approached. I was, at least a little, Dumbledore replied, but I have faith in her. Without removing his cloak, Dumbledore guided them to a nearby room. The children bowed politely as they entered. Hello, Headmaster, they chimed in unison. Conan, as always, spoke with the gravitas of the smallest detective in the group. Dumbledore returned their bow with a smile and produced a handful of candies from a bag. A small gift, he said. My good friend made these. Have one. The children beamed and accepted their sweets. Conan thanked Dumbledore as well, but rather than eating his immediately, he carefully wrapped his and slipped it into his pocket. He planned to take it back to Shaolin. Jiangju noticed and glanced at him sideways. He knew Conan had a knack for collecting odd favors and small treasures from the places they visited. Conan often brought things home for someone called Mao Leland, tales and trinkets that inflated the extraordinary. In the real, rational world, Mao Leland could not smash boulders or lampposts with a single kick, but in the stories Conan preserved, she would be back to comic book levels of impossible. The first years still have a way to go, Dumbledore said, nodding. We'll take the rest of the dormitory tours tomorrow. All right, Jiangju replied. He opened a shimmering space, a doorway, and on the other side was the vast, familiar sight of Hogwarts's Great Hall. A few professors who were already seated stared in surprise at the crack in the air. Dumbledore, unfazed by such displays, stepped into the space first. He was used to extraordinary arrivals. The other professors, however, had not expected Jiangju to present himself in that fashion. They watched, puzzled, as the headmaster led the children through, and Jiangju followed quietly behind. The great hall was already full of expectant faces when something impossible happened. A shimmering rift tore open in midair. For a moment, everyone fell silent, unsure what they were looking at. Then, calmly stepping through the gap, Albus Dumbledore signaled for them not to be alarmed. Behind him came a young man and 5 children. The professors exchanged surprised glances. The way they had arrived, by a rift in space, was nothing any of them had seen before. Dumbledore smiled and raised a hand in introduction. Good evening. This is Jiangju from the Oriental Magic Academy, he announced. He'll be with us for the next month to exchange ideas about magic. These are his companions. Jiangju returned the hall's stare with an easy smile. The 6 of them were led to seats reserved near the teachers. The sight of such unusual guests, not to mention Jiangju's calm confidence, left the staff momentarily at a loss for words. Professor McGonagall, checking the time, said something quickly to Dumbledore and Jiangju before slipping out of the hall to begin the sorting. The room hushed as the first years filed in between the long tables. Jiangju watched the ceremony with interest. You put on quite the entrance, he said softly. I don't think any of the first years expected that. Dumbledore chuckled. We have our traditions. I remember when I was sorted, I was told we might be meeting a werewolf. They turned their attention back toward the front as the sorting hats sang and the first years were placed into their houses. The usual gasps and cheers rose and fell. Hannah Abbott to Hufflepuff, various students to Ravenclaw and Gryffindor. Then Professor McGonagall's quiet voice called, Miss Harry Potter. All eyes turned to the girl in the queue. Jiangju caught, out of the corner of his eye, a potions professor with a perpetually greasy look and a silver fork-bent habit, Severus Snape, who watched with a glower that never left his face. Dumbledore followed Jiangju's look and murmured, "Severus has never quite let go of Lily." Jiangju tilted his head. "Doesn't he perhaps resent you for it in his heart?" he asked softly. "Perhaps," Dumbledore admitted. "And yet when it matters, I think he would risk everything to protect Harry." The Sorting Hat took a long moment with Harry. When it finally spoke, the announcement was met with stunned silence before a swelling cheer. "Slytherin!" That reaction, so enthusiastic from the Slytherin table, was the last thing most of the professors had expected. A girl with Harry's background and bearing was assumed by many to belong in Gryffindor. Jiangju watched Dumbledore's expression with curiosity. "Did the hat really make that decision on its own? Or did you intervene, Headmaster?" Dumbledore smiled wryly. "The Sorting Hat is a creation of the four founders. It is beyond my authority to alter its decision. I may introduce it, but I cannot touch its verdict without breaching the founders' wards and our own rules." At the Slytherin table, the students erupted into celebration. For them, Harry's being sorted into Slytherin was a triumph. For several of the staff, it meant a rearrangement of expectations. Snape, meanwhile, looked as if he might burst from the strain of conflicting emotions. Jiangju observed him with mild amusement. "If you had interfered," he said, "Professor Snape would have had a great deal to say." "Possibly," Dumbledore replied, "but I believe Severus's loyalty goes deeper than we sometimes think." The rest of the sorting proceeded much as it always did. Hermione Granger, brilliant and brave, was welcomed into Gryffindor. To everyone's surprise, or at least to the whispered surprise of some, Lucius Malfoy and his followers were placed in Gryffindor as well. The Slytherins, however, were so caught up in their excitement over Harry that they paid almost no attention to the other entrants. When the ceremony ended, McGonagall returned to her seat to restore order. Dumbledore rose to speak, a warm welcome, a reminder to behave, and a final introduction of Jiangju and his party, who might be seen about the school during the month. Then he gestured toward Jiangju. "Would you like to say a few words?" he asked. Jiangju stood, smiled at the sea of young faces, and gave a brief, friendly greeting. "Hello, I'm Jiangju. I hope this month will be a fond memory for you. Please don't be too hard on my companions, especially the children. I'm rather protective." He sat down to general amusement. The long tables cleared by magic, reappearing laden with roast and pudding and all manner of feast. The first years, after a moment's hesitation, began to tuck in. At the teacher's table, a low murmur ran through the staff. Conversation clustered around two subjects: who this Jiangju was and the unexpected sorting of Harry Potter. A few whispered that Harry's parents had been Gryffindor. Many had assumed she would follow in their footsteps. Rubeus Hagrid's broad shoulders slumped. "I should have warned her," he muttered, staring into his plate. "If I'd said Summat, maybe she wouldn't have gone to Slytherin. How could Harry Potter?" "Do you mean to imply Slytherin is unworthy of her, Hagrid?" Severus Snape's voice cut through the murmur, cool and barbed. Hagrid blinked and turned red. No, Professor Snape, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean." Snape's dark eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more, letting Hagrid stew in his own embarrassment. Around them, the great hall settled into the hum of a new school year, full of surprises already, some delightful, some worrying, and with a month ahead that promised to be anything but ordinary. Chapter 32, Extra Points. After the first-year entrance ceremony and dinner, Jiangju lingered to enjoy Hogwarts' peculiar tradition of singing the school hymn. As usual, the most troublesome students were the Weasley twins. They were somehow performing the song to the tune of a funeral march. Weren't they worried about their graduation prospects? Would they even get anything better than a boxed lunch? "Songs are supposed to be joyful," that Dumbledore observed with a smile. "Yes, depending on who's singing," came the dry reply. Jiangju had his ears magically muffled during some of the commotion. When he realized Dumbledore's lips were moving toward him, he relaxed the charm and answered. Dumbledore told them their accommodations had been prepared and that he would give them a more detailed tour of the castle the next day. "That won't be necessary," Jiangju said with a smile. "You must be busy. We can explore on our own. Don't worry, We won't tear down your castle." Dumbledore didn't press the matter. He did, however, call out, "Severus, we should speak. Don't leave." Snape, who had been standing to collect himself as the students departed, paused at the summons with his usual expressionless mask. "We can speak tomorrow," he said flatly. "No, Severus, this needs to be dealt with now," Dumbledore insisted. Snape glanced briefly at the other professors and snorted, but did not walk away. Dumbledore's look told Jiangju enough. Whatever had happened with Harry earlier had disrupted some of the headmaster's plans. He asked Professor McGonagall to keep an eye on Jiangju and the rest of the children while he and Snape slipped off together. The first evening passed quietly. After calling their parents or guardians to let them know they were safe, the children, exhausted from a long day, fell asleep the moment their heads hit the beds. Jiangju sat in the quiet for a while, wondering what to do next. Over the following days, Jiangju showed the youngsters every visible corner of the castle. They were thrilled at first, but by the 10th day, their excitement finally began to wane. If Jiangju had promised them a trip to the Forbidden Forest to see magical creatures, they might have chased him down begging to go. But without that, Hogwarts novelty ran out faster than he'd expected. How could the novelty wear off so fast? Jiangju asked Conan one afternoon, watching the children scatter to play. "Don't ask me," Conan replied, stretching out on the grass and propping his hands behind his head. "Maybe it's the first time they've been away from family. You don't always know what kids will really like." "They're kids. They should love magic," Jiangju said. "Ichigo and Linger are the exceptions. I've caught Ichigo sneaking away to practice magic on the sly, instead of just activating her charms properly." "It's a pity Ichigo isn't really suited to this magical world," Jiangju added with a rueful shrug. Conan tilted his head with curiosity. "Speaking of Ichigo, what kind of world is she from? I heard she can see souls." "That kind of ability would be a detective's nightmare," Jiangju said with a smile. "Wouldn't it make your cases easier if you could see souls?" "No, I like the process." "I don't want to cheat," Conan replied emphatically, waving his hands. "See? You scared me with that idea." They lay in the grass for a while longer, waiting for the other 4 children to finish playing so they could go back to the castle for lunch together. When they did head in, though, the atmosphere in the Great Hall felt off, especially around the Gryffindor table. Whispers floated across in a distinctly sour tone. Snape had given Harry more points. "What happened?" Jiangju asked a nearby student and found himself standing next to Hermione Granger. "Oh, Mr. Jiangju." "Hello, Conan," Hermione said, a little distracted. She only seemed to notice them after they stopped her. Jiangju repeated his question. "We were in potions with Slytherin," Hermione said, sounding exasperated. Professor Snape gave Harry 15 points. 15? Jiangju echoed, incredulous. "I thought last time it was 10 for effort and attitude. What did he get these ones for?" Hermione went on in a rush, angry and helpless at once. 5 points because the potion didn't spill, 5 because he was humble afterward, and 3 because his stirring posture was perfect. That's the justification for the first part. The rest is just... She broke off, fuming. It's impossible to be so biased. Just then the potions master passed by. He moved with the same cold grace she always did, black robes trailing in a faint scent of something that could have been lavender in the air. He brushed past Hermione and Jiangju on his way to the staff table. His expression was as implacable as ever. "He actually wore perfume," Jiangju muttered to Hermione, half amused. "Did he wash his hair?" "Isn't he always like that?" Hermione said gloomily. "All this scent and attention to appearance. As a potions master, he somehow always chooses the right fragrance. I wish I knew what potion he used on his hair." She sighed. "It's not even that he's unfair to everyone. He's just fond of Harry. If I didn't know Harry's history, I'd swear Harry was related to Professor Snape." "Looks like Snape's found another way to influence things," Jiangju shrugged, staring at Hermione's noticeably ruffled hair. "Maybe he has a side business." Hermione straightened and looked at him. "I'm heading to flying lessons this afternoon. It's our first lesson. Yes, with Slytherin. Do you want to come?" Before he could answer, Jiangju asked, "Are you and Harry friends? I see you two together sometimes." "Friends?" Hermione snapped. "I want to beat her. Everyone gets fair treatment in other classes. Teachers won't hand them points just because of who they are. Only potions is a mess. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was Professor Snape's daughter. She turned and left toward the staircases, still muttering. Jiangju watched her go, lips curling into a smile that would have suited a cartoon villain. "Everything's a mess," he said softly. "Let's see how Dumbledore handles this." Chapter 33, Oriental Flight. Jiangju sat on the staff bench, eating and watching the students. He looked amused as he watched someone at the table eating with particular elegance. Every so often, he glanced over at the Slytherin table, where Harry was surrounded by a cluster of younger pupils. The corners of his mouth twitched up. He seemed to be in a good mood. "Professor Snape likes kids a lot, doesn't he?" Jiangju said. "I like them too. They're so cute." Snape shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Jiangju, what is it you want?" "The main thing I wanted to ask," Jiangju said casually, "is whether you used any potion on your hair. Don't be offended, I'm not mocking. But there could be business in it." Jiangju shrugged. "I altered a certain potion." Snape hesitated. "If you're interested, Mr. Jiangju, we could cooperate." "Of course I'm interested," Jiangju replied, "but I take issue with what you said earlier. In the East, we're thinking of integrating wizards into ordinary life. The gap between muggles and wizards is shrinking. Technology will only increase that. If we remain isolated, ordinary people will surpass us. We divided into several groups to discuss how best to proceed." "Aren't you worried about violating the International Statute of Secrecy?" Snape asked, surprised. "We are not part of that organization," Jiangju said coolly. "At one point, they called us backward. It's a pity they aren't included now. Even if they invited us, we wouldn't join an institution that's destined to die." Snape's expression grew sharper. "Your views are dangerous," he said evenly. "I thought you were like Dumbledore." "It's not that our ideas are dangerous," Jiangju said, "but that European thinking is stuck in the past. Some people in the European wizarding world have noticed the rise of muggles. They just reacted in the wrong, extreme way. It's a pity. They might have done great things." He shrugged. "You mean Grindelwald?" Snape said. "He was a madman." "I didn't say he wasn't," Jiangju said, brushing it off. "Anyway, we were talking about potions. I think potions are the most suitable form of cooperation between wizards and muggles," Jiangju continued. "As you said in the first lesson, potions don't require anyone waving a wand. That makes them easier to share. But potions still require magical ingredients, plants and creatures, and humans are destroying those," Snape said, standing. "It seems we do not share the same language. Sorry, Mr. Jiangju, I still need certain potion formulations." "All right, forget it for now," Jiangju said, unperturbed. "But you might look into muggle biology and genetics. Under certain conditions, combining magic and technology could be the future." "Dumbledore does talk too much sometimes," Snape muttered, giving Jiangju a look. "Besides, I don't need what you offer." "Professor Snape," Jiangju said, eyes bright, "that's a daring idea, dangerous even, but I like it. Keep at it." Snape's face darkened so quickly Jiangju almost expected him to draw his wand. He very nearly cast a spell at the bold guest. He restrained himself, partly because Jiangju was Dumbledore's guest, but also because the man's power was not to be trifled with. Snape didn't want to die impetuously over a verbal sparring match. Jiangju grinned without a care and then followed the large group of students out of the castle. Today was the first flying lesson of the year, and the courtyard outside the castle where they taught broom work was packed. Both Gryffindor and Slytherin were buzzing with excitement. Flying, for wizard children, had the same pull that football or basketball had for muggles. Malfoy, predictably, was in full boastful mode, recounting once again how he had nearly collided with a muggle airplane. "Airliners fly at over 10,000 meters, he said, sneering. "A novice on a broom would never reach that height." A clear voice cut through him. Malfoy turned and saw a short-haired girl with burgundy-rimmed glasses and bright red hair stepping forward, one of the students who often tangled with him. "You don't need to lie," she said, "but if you actually tried to meet a plane, the airflow from it would blow you off your broom." She had brought a few younger students with her and spoke in a calm, teasing way. "You mean you're boasting?" Another student snapped at Malfoy. Malfoy's temper flared, but before he could answer, Rolanda Hooch, the flying instructor, marched over and ordered everyone to stand by their brooms for practice. The lesson hadn't yet begun when Malfoy, spotting Jiangju among the onlookers, put on an ingratiating tone. "Professor," he called, "could we see a demonstration from the visitors from the East? It's not often we have a chance to see other magical traditions." Hooch hesitated. It was a reasonable idea. These students had only recently arrived, and few had displayed their magic publicly. "Very well," she said. "Show us one thing, then you'll join the class." Jiangju stepped forward. He didn't plan to make a grand show for a bully, but he also wasn't going to refuse a chance to teach. He stooped, picked a fallen leaf from the ground, and touched it with his right hand. The leaf shimmered and elongated, becoming a straight, elegant sword, its shape and ornamentation unmistakably Eastern. "In the East, there are many ways to fly," Jiangju said. "The most common is sword control." He made a precise gesture. The sword rose and hovered in his hand. Then he leapt up and planted his foot on the narrow blade. The sword steadied beneath him, then rose, carrying him into the air. It danced and circled, then returned smoothly, allowing him to dismount. Gasps spread through the courtyard. The image of a man standing on such a slim sword and flying with balance and grace struck the students as impossibly beautiful. "How is that even possible?" Hermione asked, eyes wide. "This is the sword control technique from Shushan Academy of Witchcraft and Wizardry," Jiangju said with a small smile, casually turning the name into something the students could relate to. "You might say it's a more advanced version of your levitation charms." "That's amazing! Teach me," a red-haired boy with freckles exclaimed, his eyes shining. Chapter 34. Harry's Flying Talent. People in the East never quite understood why wizards rode broomsticks. Likewise, many children born into wizarding families still found it odd that something so small could carry a person through the air. They asked each other the same childish questions. What if someone's legs gave out? Would they fall? Wouldn't it be dangerous? "Of course, broom control is the usual method," Jiangju said with a wry smile. "In the East, we also fly in other ways. The more powerful can even form clouds." He snapped his fingers, and a soft white puff appeared, as light and sweet-looking as cotton candy. It drifted down and rested gently on the ground. "Wow, like a marshmallow," a chubby boy exclaimed, then flushed when he realized how foolish he sounded. "Longbottom, if you keep thinking with your stomach empty, you'll be dumb all week," Malfoy sneered. "Shut up, Malfoy. Don't make a spectacle of Slytherin," Harry muttered, more amused than angry. "Just watch." Jiangju paid the children's squabbles no mind. He pointed toward the cloud and asked, "Would anyone like to try?" Hermione's hand shot up without thinking. "Professor Zhang," she began, "can that cloud really fly? And is it safe to stand on?" Jiangju smiled. "Since you asked, why don't you try?" The cloud drifted to Hermione and rose to lift her gently. She gasped. It felt soft as promised, but it didn't let her fall. Some unseen support held her up. Hermione, who'd always been a little anxious about heights, found herself calming as the cloud steadied beneath her feet. "How do you control it?" she asked, curiosity overcoming her nerves. "By thought," Jiangju said. "Yunduo responds to simple intentions. It won't follow complicated commands, but tell it to go and it will." He gestured at the sky. "Mind it and see." Hermione concentrated and the cloud moved. At first, it drifted slowly. Once she got used to it, she flew in gentle circles above Hogwarts. The castles swallowed in the blue around them. When she finally came down, she was reluctant to step off. "Since you like it, I'll give it to you," Jiangju said, waving his hand. The cloud dissolved into milky light and merged with Hermione's arm, leaving a delicate tattoo that shimmered as if alive. "In future, you'll have to fuel it with your own magic to use it." Hermione hesitated. Accepting such a gift felt extravagant. Jiangju smiled and shrugged. "In the East, we say you should not refuse a gift from someone older. Take it." Before she could protest further, the bell for flying lessons rang and Professor Rolanda Hooch clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. Hooch's hawk-like gaze swept over the students, dismissing the novelty of the demonstration in favor of the task at hand. "Right, everyone, to your broomsticks," she called. "When I say, shout up and mount." Red-haired Ron was first. "Up!" he shouted, but his broom only twitched and then stopped, giving him a small bonk as it tried and failed to steady itself. He scrambled and cursed under his breath. Malfoy's tone was smooth and arrogant when he called, and his broom rose obediently into his hand. He smirked and looked over at Harry, who still hadn't spoken. "What's the matter? Our famous savior doesn't know how to get on a broom?" Malfoy taunted, loud enough for several people to laugh. Hooch looked at Harry with a half-expectant expression. Harry's father had been a celebrated seeker on the Gryffindor Quidditch team. People assumed Harry's talent would come naturally. "Harry, try again. Don't be nervous." Harry glanced at Malfoy and snorted before shouting, "Up!" with no wavering in his voice. Nothing happened. His broom lay perfectly still. Jiangju watched with quiet interest. He noticed something off. Harry's resistance was not mere stubbornness. With a subtle probe of his senses, small enough that no one else would notice, he realized the source. Harry was afraid of heights. That fear, bubbling under the surface, was preventing the broom from responding to him. Hooch, who had taught generations of students, knew the signs of flight anxiety. She softened when she spoke. "Harry, flying isn't as frightening as it looks. Don't let fear take hold. Trust yourself." "You're the boy who lived," Malfoy jeered. "If Harry Potter, the savior, can't even fly, that'll be a laugh." Professor Hooch's face hardened. "That's enough, Mr. Malfoy. 2 points from Slytherin for your rudeness." Her tone was stern. "Say another word like that and you won't be having flying lessons this term." Malfoy fell silent, scowling as he stepped back. Something about Hooch's kindness and the encouraging looks from a few classmates, especially the warm, unexpected glance from Ichigo Kurosaki, reached Harry. For a moment, he felt less alone, less ridiculous. The tightness in his chest eased, and he found his voice small and honest. "Professor, I'm sorry," he said. "I'm afraid of heights." Hooch's expression softened even more. She had taught plenty of students who were born to muggles or raised away from the skies and knew fear could be overcome with patience. The class quieted, watching to see how their famous classmate would be helped, or whether, despite everything, Harry Potter would learn to fly. Chapter 35. The Gift Before Leaving. Harry was actually afraid of heights. The news shocked everyone in Slytherin, and the Gryffindors jeered. After all, Slytherin and Gryffindor were mortal enemies, and Harry was supposed to be their savior. Months of curiosity had been exhausted. Everyone had discovered that Harry Potter had the same nose and the same 2 eyes as anyone else. Still, Harry finally forced himself to overcome his fear and managed to summon a broom into his hands. Just as they were all about to take off, today's flying lesson was abruptly called off. Complaints rose up around them, but Jiangju, who had become something of the children's guardian, said nothing. She had lived through stranger disruptions in the past 11 years and was unruffled. Yet she knew it was her own actions that had prevented the class from finishing, so she remained composed and apologized as they dispersed. That evening at dinner, Professor Dumbledore brought up the flying lesson again. Jiangju rolled her eyes privately. You didn't need to remind them that this place was a school, she thought. Still, Dumbledore surprised her by taking out a sheet of paper and handing it over. "By the way, Mr. Jiang," he said, adopting the formal tone appropriate to the headmaster, "this is a handwritten permission slip. You may take the children into the Forbidden Forest tomorrow to see the magical creatures." "Thank you," Jiangju said with a smile. "They've been clamoring to see the magical beasts. Their wish will finally come true." Dumbledore smiled back. "To preserve their wildness, the beasts in the Forbidden Forest will remain undisturbed and in their natural state. I hope you'll be lenient. Some of them are endangered." "Don't worry, I'm not that stingy," Jiangju replied. Then, after a moment, she added, "I've kept you on for long enough. Let me show my gratitude. After dinner, I'll come by your office and we can discuss it." Dumbledore blinked in surprise, but only nodded. He felt a curious mixture of expectation and unease. For someone who had lived as long as he had, time seemed to slow when he was anxious. After dinner, they met in the headmaster's office. Jiangju glanced around casually, then stopped at the old phoenix perched nearby. It wasn't as grand as the phoenixes of myth, smaller perhaps, but it still had the same ability to burst into flame and be reborn from its ashes. She reached out and stroked the bird's feathers, then looked back at Dumbledore, who had settled into his chair. "Voldemort," Jiangju began softly, "I know you aren't afraid of him, but because of the Horcruxes you need a plan. I want to help, I can destroy a Horcrux, and I want to give you this." She handed Dumbledore a ring. The headmaster's hand trembled slightly as he recognized it. "Mervolo Gaunt's ring? The Resurrection Stone?" he said, hardly daring to speak it. Jiangju nodded. "I destroyed the remnant of Voldemort's soul that was attached to it. Take the ring." Dumbledore sat very still. There was the familiar ache of regret behind his composed expression, but he could not mask a flash of relief. "Thank you," he whispered. Jiangju's voice grew matter-of-fact. "As for the other Horcruxes, think about Voldemort's nature and what he would value. His most trusted companion was Nagini. There's Ravenclaw's diadem, Hufflepuff's cup, Slytherin's locket, his diary, and last of all, Harry Potter." Dumbledore exhaled. Because of Lily's protection, his soul was torn apart the night he attacked the Potters. A fragment latched onto Harry, made him an unintended Horcrux. Their fates are linked. "No one else would have thought of so many Horcruxes," Dumbledore said, stunned. "No one has ever attempted such a thing." Small wonder he grew ever more monstrous and paranoid. "Don't blame yourself for what he became," Jiangju said lightly. "That fate wasn't your fault." Dumbledore offered a bitter little smile and fell silent. He had often blamed himself for not recognizing Tom Riddle's darker tendencies sooner, for not steering him away from them. But such self-recriminations changed nothing. "Do you need me to tell you where the Horcruxes are?" Jiangju asked, taking a sip from a can of Coke she had produced. Dumbledore's gratitude was plain on his face. "If you would, yes." So Jiangju spoke plainly, as she always did. "Tom Riddle's diary is in the Malfoy house. Lucius Malfoy hid it there. Slytherin's locket, you could locate it through Regulus Black's house elf, but that assumes you have the support of the Black family. Without them, the elf won't hand it over. Hufflepuff's cup was stolen by Bellatrix Lestrange and is kept in Gringotts. Ravenclaw's diadem is hidden in the Room of Requirement. It's the easiest to access of the lot. As for Nagini and Harry, those require a different approach." Dumbledore listened, taking in each revelation with the gravity it deserved. With Jiangju's words, he suddenly had a map of Voldemort's soul pieces and their likely locations. It was still a perilous task. Each Horcrux had to be tracked down and destroyed, but at least there was a plan. Jiangju, having offered what she could, leaned back. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment, turning the weight of the information over in his mind. If they were careful and methodical, he thought, they could not only prevent Voldemort's return, but also use the task to prepare the next generation of wizards to face such evils. Outside, the castle settled for the night. Inside the headmaster's office, with a phoenix softly rustling its plumage and a ring gleaming in the firelight, the first steps of that plan were quietly set into motion. Chapter 36. Where are the fantastic beasts? Jiangju had simply told Dumbledore where the Horcrux was. What Dumbledore chose to do next was his own problem. If he wanted to risk bringing someone back from the dead, that was a decision for him. Jiangju felt no obligation to meddle. The exchange had left him quietly amused and a little cold. "Professor Jiang," Dumbledore said after a long silence, "one thing I still want to ask you. Is it true that the dead cannot come back?" Jiangju shrugged. "I already told you, death is an irreversible process. There are places some worlds call afterlives, and souls can linger or reappear in different forms, but that isn't the same as being alive again. It's another kind of presence. Letting the dead rest and learning to move on is something the living have to do for ourselves." "Have you ever been faced with that choice?" Dumbledore asked softly. "I have," Jiangju admitted, a brief, rueful smile crossing his face. "When I was younger and more reckless, I tried things like that. In the end, I learned that loss, painful as it is, often makes us appreciate the present more." Dumbledore said nothing. He had his own private troubles, tangled thoughts about the Resurrection Stone and what it would mean to use it, and Jiangju's pragmatic words only added to the weight on his mind. Jiangju didn't press the issue. He left the headmaster's office and let Dumbledore think alone. Once Jiangju was gone, the portraits of former headmasters, which had fallen oddly silent during the meeting, slid back into their frames and began whispering among themselves. They had all been anxious to hear what the famous Eastern wizard and Dumbledore had to say. But when Jiangju strode into the office earlier, an instinctive fear had sent many of them narrowing their eyes and averting their gazes. Dumbledore, what sort of man did you bring to Hogwarts? He's terrifying, one remarked indignantly. We tried to look at him and couldn't. We only wanted to understand him. Dumbledore smiled a little and defended his visitor. Professor Zhang is a kind man. Whatever happened earlier was for reasons he preferred not to discuss. The portraits bombarded Dumbledore with questions, but he knew this was not a matter to be gossipingly speculated about. Some things required discretion. He fell into thought again, circling back to the resurrection stone and the choice it represented, remorse and longing colliding in his chest. But those were his burdens. They had nothing to do with Jiangju. Jiangju slept well that night. The next morning, after breakfast with the children, he took them into the Forbidden Forest and arranged for Hagrid to meet Dumbledore there. Hagrid had been wary earlier, and Dumbledore wanted to ensure the giant gamekeeper was comfortable with an outsider leading a group into the woods. If Professor Dumbledore is all right with it, you may go, Hagrid said in his gentle, booming voice. Are you sure it's all right for you to lead them on your own? Don't worry, Jiangju answered with a smile. I'm also the head of a magic school. With that, he led the children into the trees. 10 minutes, walking under Jiangju's subtle guidance, felt light and easy. His magic kept them from tiring. The children ran with bright, excited faces, spotting harmless magical creatures along the way. An 8-eyed spider skittered out from behind a curtain of ferns, and the children, under Jiangju's calm influence, lost whatever instinctive fear they might have had. They were soon chasing one another and inventing games, a raucous tower game that left them laughing and shrieking. Good, Jiangju said with a satisfied smile. No one will panic at a spider now. They pressed deeper into the forest and at last found a pool where a herd of unicorns had gathered. The creatures were luminous in the dappled light, their coats catching the sun and turning it almost white. The sight stole the breath from the children, especially the 3 girls. Wow, she's beautiful, Xiaoli said, her voice full of awe. She really is, Zhao Linger agreed, eyes shining. Let's get closer, Jiangju said, stroking Linger's hair. Don't worry, they won't run away. Linger grabbed Xiaoli's hand in Yuzi's, and the 3 of them ran forward. Because Jiangju was present, the unicorns showed only curiosity, not fear. They ambled over and gently rubbed their heads against the children as if greeting old friends. You two, though, will have to look from a distance, Jiangju said when he noticed Ichigo and Conan watching longingly. Unicorns don't much like boys. I read that unicorns hate everyone, Conan protested indignantly. If you can let them near Linger, why can't we touch them? I want to too, Ichigo added, looking at Jiangju with pleading eyes. Jiangju hesitated only a moment and then nodded. For a heartbeat, the boys smiled, but as soon as they stepped forward, the unicorns backed away and melted into the trees. Conan's face flushed with disappointment and frustration as he glared at Jiangju. All right, Jiangju said, clapping his hands to lift spirits. We've seen the unicorns. There are griffins and other beasts deeper in. Let's go. They did. Griffins with proud faces, near-invisible creatures that shimmered at the edge of sight, bizarre horned beasts with venomous spines. Even an odd creature that set some of the children giggling as they imitated a strange, bouncy dance they'd heard about from Newt Scamander. The children were delighted until the mood of the forest shifted and a contingent of centaurs emerged, bows taut and expressions cold. Humans are not welcome here. You have crossed the boundary, one of the centaurs intoned, unmoved by the gathering of small, frightened faces. This ground is still part of the Hogwarts borders, Jiangju said evenly. But you speak as if it belongs only to you. It does belong to us, another centaur replied, voice flat. You should not have come so deep. Leave now. Jiangju, normally patient with creatures and people alike if they knew their place, felt the irritation rise. This had been intended as a gentle, wondrous morning for the children, many of whom had been away from their families a long time and missed them badly, including one little girl who thought of a certain childhood friend named Xiaolan. For that fleeting few hours he had wanted to give them something to remember, and now strangers with bows were threatening to ruin it. He glanced at the children. Their excitement was fading, their smiles tightening into anxious looks. The centaur's hard stance had tainted the wonder. Jiangju's expression hardened slightly. He was not a man to be bullied, and he would not see the children turned away from their brief happiness if he could help it. He stepped forward, voice calm but firm, ready to negotiate or, if necessary, defend the children's right to this place. Chapter 37. Returned centaurs were a proud people, maybe too proud. It was a strange sort of pride, creatures intelligent enough that humans might once have considered them sentient, yet they had retreated into the shadows and been catalogued as mere magical beasts. They depended on Hogwarts as much as any other tribe in the Forbidden Forest, and yet they didn't bother to show any gratitude. To Jiangju, that made them infuriatingly foolish. Pride was one thing when it belonged to the strong. You could respect it. But when the weak strutted and sneered, his only response was to put them in their place. He didn't make a scene in front of the children. After sending them back to the castle with a casual wave, Jiangju didn't use any flashy magic. He moved with his usual speed and let his fists, each one like a sandbag, do the talking. One by one, the centaurs went down, groaning and unable to stand. He was careful not to do any real damage. Dumbledore arrived at the tail end of the scuffle and watched, rueful and embarrassed. "Don't worry," Jiangju said when Dumbledore hurried up. He was rinsing his hands as if it were nothing. "I didn't kill anyone, just a few bruises. 10.5 days of rest, and they'll be fine." Dumbledore let out a relieved laugh. "I believed you, of course. I only came because I worried, well, because the children returned sooner than expected." He had been nervous. Seeing a flash of Jiangju's temper hadn't helped. "We won't silence anyone." "Good." Jiangju's expression hardened briefly. "We don't kill people in cold blood." Dumbledore had meant to ask about the odd connection he'd glimpsed between Voldemort and Quirrell, but like a sensible man, he kept it to himself. He watched Jiangju for a moment longer. "You saved the children?" "They're eating under Conan's supervision," Jiangju said with a half-smile. "They trust me." Dumbledore's smile softened in return. "I can see why. The way you arrived was a little shocking, yes." Jiangju shrugged. "I thought he'd try to act against me, but apart from that one moment at the opening ceremony, I hardly ever saw him beyond China. He's cautious." Dumbledore's eyes flicked. He didn't press. He had other worries. Later, he would use his Patronus to send a message to the centaur herd about the disturbance, but for the moment, he simply listened as Jiangju said, "I'm starving. The food in your castle is excellent. I'll go back." With a final nod, Jiangju vanished. Dumbledore had the Patronus carry a warning to the centaurs anyway. When the silvery doe arrived at the clearing, the scene deprived him of some of his usual composure. Nearly 1,000 centaurs gathered, a handful standing and the rest, male and female, old and young, laid out in various states of unconsciousness. Someone had plainly taken them apart. "This can't continue," Dumbledore muttered to himself. A sleeping centaur herd left the Forbidden Forest exposed, not just to werewolves and other predators, but to political opportunists too. He had no illusions that Jiangju's actions were the cause of that risk. He only had to see the scene to recognize the danger, and felt a headache rise. He returned to the castle, had a quiet dinner, shared a one-sided conversation with Professor Snape, and then went to bed. For their part, the children's plans for a night out with Harry Potter were treated as if no adult knew anything about them. Time moved on in that pleasant, uncertain way it had around Hogwarts, and the 30-day window for travel finally closed. The children were happy to be heading home, but all of them wore a little shadow because they knew they would miss Sister Hermione and Sister Harry, the two older girls they'd grown fond of, and the thought of never seeing them again rankled. Dumbledore soothed them with promises of occasional visits, and Cia Li and the others brightened at that. "Parting feels like a life-or-death separation, really," Conan muttered with mock solemnity. "Only a sentimental tomboy would say that," Jiangju teased, tapping him on the head. "Enough chatter. Help calm the others down." Conan grumbled that Jiangju had earlier called him a professional, as if his being in charge was some great burden, but he moved off to console the younger children. When the last preparations were nearly finished, Jiangju escorted the kids to the edge of the Forbidden Forest one last time, bid Dumbledore goodbye, opened the boundary gate, and returned to his tavern. Night had fallen on the little tavern. It was empty and quiet, and Xiao He wasn't around, an oddity that made Jiangju frown. As the children reached the familiar building, their earlier melancholy evaporated. Their faces lit up. "Go up and get some rest," Jiangju told them in a calm voice. "I'll take you home properly tomorrow." "Okay," Ichigo burst out immediately. "Can we play games?" The children had enjoyed their adventures in the magical world, but without electricity there wasn't much to do at night. No TV, no consoles, and the kids longed for familiar entertainments. "All right," Jiangju said. "1 hour only, then straight to bed. Conan, you're on duty too. If you do well, I might take you to meet the real Sherlock Holmes someday." Conan's eyes widened with excitement. He had been thrilled by the Sherlock Holmes he'd seen in the tavern, but the idea of meeting the original 19th century detective made his voice go breathless. "Really? The original Sherlock Holmes?" "Yes," Jiangju replied with a smile. "So you'll keep them in line?" "It's a deal," Conan said without hesitation. He would do anything for a chance to meet his idol. Keeping a few children off the sofas for an hour would be nothing. The 5 kids sprinted upstairs, their laughter echoing. Jiangju stood in the empty common room and looked around. Xiao He must have gone out for his usual nocturnal wander. He slept in the daytime and prowled by night. Jiangju wasn't worried. Few things could harm Xiao He, and he trusted the cat-like man's instincts. "You're getting lazy about keeping the place tidy," he muttered and snapped his fingers. The tavern straightened itself in a neat shimmering of magic. No one would notice the subtle tidying, but Jiangju, he liked things orderly. At that moment, the door banged open, and Xiao He staggered in, a little drunk and a lot drowsy. He belched loudly and blinked blearily at Jiangju. "You're back," Xiao He mumbled. "Thought you weren't coming until tomorrow." "Drinking again?" Jiangju sighed, shaking his head. "There's plenty of wine in the tavern. You didn't need to go out and guzzle it all." Xiao He frowned as if the question of restraint were an abstract concept. He flopped down and closed his eyes, muttering something that might, with generous translation, have passed for an apology. Jiangju rolled his eyes, already planning how he would make sure the children had their 1 hour of play, and that they were tucked into bed on time. Chapter 38. Going Home. Xiao He had meant to step out for just a little fun, but he got so drunk he forgot Jiangju would be back that night. When the memory hit him, he rushed home to find Jiangju already sitting in the tavern. Seeing him there, Xiao He tried to act casual. "Why did you go out drinking?" Jiangju asked. Xiao He belched and grinned. "No one at the tavern was drinking with me." "That's not an excuse. You shouldn't have left me here alone," Jiangju said, half reproachful, half teasing. "I just wanted to travel for a bit. People keep asking me, what's the point of everything? What's the meaning?" Xiao He said petulantly. "And the worst part is you didn't even stream it." "What do you mean, what's the point? You don't have to justify everything," Jiangju said, surprised. "I just wanted to see Harry Potter." "Why can't I do that?" "You left your customers to get drunk by yourself. That's the problem," Xiao He complained, flopping across the table in front of him. "You're the tavern owner. You can't just drop everything and disappear." All right, I was wrong." Jiangju paused, then shrugged. He didn't really mind being scolded. He'd been on a whim. He'd wanted to take the kids somewhere fun, mainly for Zhao Linger. Her life had been hard, always constrained by fate, and Jiangju wanted to give her something she could just enjoy. After he freed her from that fate, she'd lost the person who loved her most. This trip was meant to be a small compensation, a chance to relax, see another world. Conan could help watch the children. That was his only practical reason for inviting him. "Just admit you were wrong," Xiao He said. Then he passed on the gossip from the tavern. "By the way, the Emperor came by looking for you a few times, and Zhao Shu came too, kept saying how lonely he is in the palace. I felt sorry for him and gave him the Sunflower Book." "The Sunflower Book? Did you tell him that it's for eunuchs?" Jiangju raised an eyebrow. "Of course I told him," Xiao He replied quickly. "I'm not about to play tricks on someone you like. Besides, the title is written in big, bold characters on the cover. I don't think he'll try to practice with it." He flipped the book over for emphasis. He could have ribbed Jiangju more, but he knew better than to tease him in front of customers. Jiangju might laugh it off sometimes, but when he was working, Xiaohei knew a prank could get him angry fast. Good, good. Don't make a habit of it. Jiangju picked him up and pulled him into an embrace. What about that Odin fellow? Is he still causing trouble? Loki's been in a few times, and that silly hammer god. That's the god of thunder, Jiangju interrupted, flicking Xiaohei's forehead with a smile. You don't need a hammer or an axe to be forceful, Xiaohei grinned, rubbing Jiangju's hand. All right, I'll let it slide. Jiangju smiled, and then asked the question he'd been waiting to ask. Was the Harry Potter world fun? It was fine. Snape was actually entertaining. He's not just greasy hair and a sour face all day anymore, Jiangju replied, eyes bright. He told Xiaohai about the things he'd seen there, a few words with Dumbledore, giving Hermione a small enchanted cloud, and mostly just playing with the children. Listening, Xiaohei sighed. It was clear Jiangju had gone simply to enjoy himself, not to meddle in anything important. It's late. I should get some rest, Xiaohei said, yawning. Fine. If you don't want to hear more, I'll stop, Jiangju said with a mock pout. He carried Xiaohei up to the second floor. He'd expected to find the children awake and watching television or playing games, but they were already asleep. Jiangju smiled, tugged the quilt up over the mischievous Kurosaki Ichigo, and returned to his own room. Home really is the best place, he sighed, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, he woke early to prepare breakfast. Guyi was standing at the door when he came out. He opened it and greeted him. You care a lot about your precious apprentice, Jiangju said with a smile. She's not just my apprentice, she's the treasure of the entire Kamatage, Guyi said, a rueful pride in his voice. People have been pestering me about her for weeks. Seeing Linger so popular makes me feel like I honored Li Xiaoyao's trust. Jiangju laughed. She's still having breakfast. Give me a moment. They chatted while they waited. When Zhao Linger and the other children came downstairs, chattering and bright-eyed, Guyi couldn't help but beam. He picked up Zhao Linger, who ran into his arms happily. It had been a month since he'd last seen her. Conan, do you want me to take you back, or will you go alone? Jiangju asked after Guyi led Zhao Linger away. I'll go on my own, Conan said. As a high school student, he wouldn't be seen off like a child. All right, see you next time. Jiangju led Kurosaki Ichigo and 3 other children to the World Travel Gate. The car they used was the same familiar one. Feeling that the little excursion had to come to an end, he summoned it and drove them to the Kurosaki home. Both Ichigo and his wife were there. They offered warm hospitality, but Jiangju declined politely and waved goodbye before driving off. In that way, the spontaneous trip he'd imagined ended perfectly. Hey boss, back already? Zeus's familiar voice called as Jiangju returned to the tavern. Just got back, Jiangju said with a smile. What, did your wife kick you out again? Isn't that always the case? Today's my day off. Hardly a day of rest, Zeus complained, eyes comically forlorn. Boss, you owe me. You did me wrong last time. All right, this time I have a new idea. I'll treat you to a drink. Try my latest brew. Maybe it'll help, Jiangju said, already heading to his post behind the bar. He settled back into the familiar rhythm of the tavern, smiling calmly as he took up his work. Chapter 39, Familiar Daily Life. It had been just over a month since Jiangju came back. The days seemed to slip by fast, mostly because nothing much happened. The tavern's rhythm fell into a comfortable sameness, the usual parade of odd guests, humans, monsters, demons, whatever you could imagine, they all showed up. Everything and everyone the tavern needed. What have you been up to lately? Jiangju asked, curious, as he sat across from a burly Tauren nursing his drink. Hey, thanks for the wine, boss, the Tauren said with the grin every man knows how to flash. I've found a beauty. After centuries of quiet, my heart finally stirred. Aren't you afraid of getting beaten to death by your wife? Jiangju asked with mock concern. He'd noticed he'd been drinking a little too freely of some of the stranger liquors lately. The monsters seemed to buy those most often. My Iron Fan's been busy with the kids and hardly pays any attention to me. Worse, that bitch even flirted with my brother, like I wouldn't notice, the Tauren growled. Jiangju's curiosity got the better of him. By the way, I heard your kid can breathe the 3 tastes of real fire. You're a wild cow spirit, and your wife was born in a sea of blood. How does your child have the strongest fire in the world?" The Tauren's expression snapped shut. He jabbed a finger at Jiangju. Then, remembering the last time a pig demon caused a scene in the tavern, he stood up in a huff and stomped out without answering. He left Jiangju's shouted apologies hanging in the air. "Oh, come on! I was just kidding! Sin! Sin!" Jiangju muttered, deflated. Around him, a few patrons looked down at their mugs, suddenly very interested in the table. It was already whispered knowledge. The Bull Demon King's wife had been seeing someone else. The child wasn't his. Yet here, the Bull Demon King himself sat there looking innocent as can be. The others found that more than a little unnerving. "Isn't Red Boy's fire from the Bagua furnace bricks on Flame Mountain?" Conan said, giving Jiangju a deadpan look. "Hey, brother Conan, you read Journey to the West too?" Jiangju laughed. "I was only joking. Didn't think he'd take it seriously." "You don't get to be so casual with your identity," Conan said with a shrug. "You knocked the Bull Demon King back into his original form with one move. Everyone knows you caused spoilers. Of course they'd believe you." "Really? So that's what I am?" Jiangju asked, looking at the others. They all nodded without hesitation, which left him speechless. The room erupted in raucous chatter again. Jiangju flicked Conan on the forehead and settled back into his seat. He hadn't meant to needle the Bull Demon King. The question had only popped into his head because, as a mortal long ago, he'd watched those old thunderous dramas and the memory had surfaced. Just then, the tavern door opened and Qinzheng walked in, pausing to look around before approaching Jiangju. He'd sent people here, searching many times before, and had finally found him. "Boss, long time no see," Qinzheng greeted. "Long time," Jiangju replied with a smile. "Sit down." Qinzheng did as asked and poured himself some tea. "I've been coming by because I had questions and hoped you could advise me. Turns out the boss wasn't around." "Oh, what kind of questions?" Jiangju asked, curious. "It was about rewriting the legal code of Dakin," Qinzheng said with a faint smile. "But it's done now. Senior Xiaohei lent me some books. With them, the legalists, and I finalized and promulgated the first confirmed laws of the Qin Empire after several months of work." Jiangju's face went blank. Xiaohei had that kind of ability? He hadn't realized. Did naming Xiaohei mean he suddenly became omnipotent? He tried not to look as startled as he felt. "I even assigned people to travel and explain the new laws everywhere," Qinzheng continued. "It's costly, but maybe it's a fresh start." "To the Qin Empire," Jiangju said, lifting his cup. "Thank you, boss," Qinzheng replied earnestly, clinking glasses. "If it weren't for your tavern, I might have ended up dead like a lost second in history." He bowed his head a little in genuine gratitude. "Everything's fate. Cheers." They drank. Qinzheng's smile was hopeful. As a man who liked to take credit, he was determined to change the course of Da Qin. He didn't want all his hard work to fall to ruin after his death. "I didn't just come to thank Senior Xiaohei," Qinzheng added after a beat. "I wanted to buy some mechanical books." "Help yourself to anything on the shelf," Jiangju said with a grin. "If you need more, you could try buying from some of the patrons. There are a few emperors and world-level bosses who drop by here." At that, Qinzheng's eyes brightened. It might be a stopgap fix, but it could relieve an immediate shortage. Still, as a ruler thinking of posterity, he didn't want to rely on favors forever. Jiangju understood. His roots lay there, and he was willing to help the Qin Empire where he could. It wasn't free, and people could say he was biased, but he didn't mind. "Don't worry about transport. I'll take care of it. Once you sign a purchase contract, leave the rest to me," Jiangju said. "I trust you completely on that," Qinzheng replied, grateful. After the serious business wound down, they chatted idly for a while. Qinzheng apologized for interrupting and wandered off to pore over a book on mechanics. Jiangju settled back and began to read too, but his quiet was short-lived. Xiaohei bounded over, tablet in hand, and thrust it toward him. "Tony Stark, the famous American playboy and arms dealer, was attacked in Afghanistan yesterday," Xiaohei announced, tapping the headline. Jiangju glanced at the screen and smiled. "Looks like the long-awaited Iron Man is finally making his entrance." "The wheel of history has begun to turn," Xiaohei said, a hint of wry irritation in his voice, "though it's moving more than a year ahead of schedule." Chapter 40. The Ten Rings and the Dr. Tony Stark had been kidnapped. Jiangju wasn't surprised it happened. He'd expected it, but he hadn't expected it to happen so fast. Then again, he hadn't expected the tavern and the planet smashing either. After the face incident, Tony had managed to miniaturize the arc reactor and, with Jiangju's subtle nudging, had built a first-generation heart reactor in the cave. Jiangju had specifically told Xiaohei that when Tony built the reactor, he should get the canonical experience, the cave where Iron Man was truly born. After all, in the original story, it wasn't the armor that made Iron Man, it was Tony Stark, Tony who made and controlled the armor. When Captain America asked, "Who are you without the suit?" Tony's answer was practical. Tony Stark is Iron Man, and Iron Man is Tony Stark. "There's one question," Jiangju said suddenly, realizing they'd overlooked something. He turned to Xiaohei. "Ethan, he was kidnapped too, wasn't he? That can't be a coincidence." "That's a very good question," Xiaohei admitted in his usual blasé tone. "I totally forgot about Ethan. Want me to go check on him now?" "It's been a day since the report came in," Jiangju said, rolling his eyes. "Do you think bringing Ethan in now will do anything except put him in more danger?" Xiaohei's voice went low and a little flustered. "Can he even build an iron suit by himself?" "You're asking me," Jiangju said. "Who else would answer?" Jiangju scanned Tony's condition from where he stood. Tony lay on a crude cot in a dark cave, pale but conscious. His hands, feet, and forehead were wrapped in white gauze, and a dark stain seeped through the bandage on his brow. The wounds didn't look life-threatening, certainly better than the original timeline. Jiangju breathed out. "Fortunately, nothing irreparable. I'll fix his internal injuries." Xiaohai yawned. "You were the one who told me to find Obadiah Stane. Now you worry about Tony. I don't get you." Jiangju shrugged. "I want Iron Man to appear, but I don't want Tony dead. It's not the same if he's gone." "So do you think he'll become Iron Man again?" Xiaohei asked. "I don't know." Jiangju was honest. "But if he doesn't, we can make him go through it again." "Please, be human," Xiaohei groaned, black lines practically appearing over his head. "At this point, should I say, I am no longer a human, Jojo?" Jiangju struck a ridiculous pose. "Tone it down," Xiaohei muttered. "Also, there are customers in the tavern right now." That stopped Jiangju mid-prance. He froze, then literally went rigid, clattering to the floor in a ridiculous heap. The tavern guests erupted in laughter. The owner of the place was a top-tier player, but he liked to play the part of a down-market tavern keeper, so people would relax and enjoy themselves. It was a tactic that let everyone drop their guard for once. Far away, in a mountain valley in Afghanistan, a large camp of the organization calling itself the Ten Rings gathered. They called themselves Resistance, but their methods were anything but humane. They were armed with some of the world's most advanced weapons, and puzzlingly, with the latest tech developed by Stark Industries. That alone made the situation strange. Stark Industries was a prime contractor for the U.S. military, yet its equipment was in the hands of local militants. "We almost got duped by that Yankee this time." The bald leader snarled in a mud brick room, glaring at his men. "He didn't tell us what would happen if we hit Tony." "Thank God the Playboy survived," a tall, ruddy-faced man said flatly. "Tony Stark works with the U.S. military and is important to them. They won't stop looking for him, so our time is short." "His wounds?" the leader cut in. "One of the men we took last time had a surgeon with him. He's been patching Tony up," said an Afghan man wearing a turban. "We should make Tony wake up soon. There's still much to do." "Keep the surgeon and his assistant in the cave," the bald man decided. "We can't let them go for free. If they want to eat, they'll work." The captured surgeon and his assistant were indeed in a simple cave room. A bed, 2 chairs, a desk lamp, and medical supplies. On the bed lay a pale man, Tony, bandaged at hands, feet, and temple. Beside the bed sat the surgeon, a sleepy-looking Asian man with messy hair and a few bruises on his face. The surgeon had been trying to keep himself calm despite the situation. The door opened and 2 soldiers pushed a woman into the room, murmuring in their language. She answered them sharply, and they left, closing the door. "Leah, what happened?" the surgeon asked, his brow furrowed. "They turned on people," the woman, Leah, said, face pale, voice tight. "They killed the others." "What? Those beasts?" Dr. Wu, he introduced himself as Dr. Wu, moved to bolt for the door, fury making him reckless. Leah clutched his arm. "No, Dr. Wu, they're not human right now. Don't be impulsive, or both of us will die." Dr. Wu slammed his fist into the wall, using the pain to drown out his helplessness. If he hadn't been a surgeon, he would have taken action. But he couldn't. He had to stay alive to help Tony. "We may be able to rely on Tony," Leah said, voice breaking. "Please, doctor, save him. If you don't, we're all dead. I can't face those monsters if Tony can't help us." Dr. Wu swallowed, staring at Tony's fragile chest rising and falling under the lamp's thin light. He had to do what he could. Kayak after kayak of dread and responsibility crossed his mind. This mission had already gone wrong in so many ways, but the tools he had were his hands and his training. He set them to work. Chapter 41. Sad Tony. Tony felt like the last few days had been a fever dream. He had meant to be home, building his next suit in peace, but Obadiah Stane and several restless shareholders had made that impossible. So he'd agreed, mostly to get away, to go along with his friend Roddy on a military trip to Afghanistan and, incidentally, to show off Stark Industries' new Jericho missile. It should have been a good publicity stop. Tony put on his usual show, kept as far away from Roddy as he could, rode in the transport provided by the army, and joked with the frontline soldiers. Then everything changed in an instant. A mine blew the car in front of them into a twisted iron shell. The kid who'd been laughing and asking for a photo was shredded where he'd been standing. The young woman Tony had flirted with, he called her a flower in the army, died while shielding him. Tony didn't plan to sit there and wait for whatever came next. He tried to contact the outside world, but before he could do anything, a small missile landed not far away. On its dark green casing, the white Stark Industries logo flashed in his face. So that was it. "I'm going to be killed by a missile I made," he thought, half bitter, half incredulous. The last thing he remembered was the missile's power. Reliable, efficient Stark engineering, doing exactly what it was built to do. He was blown clear. Miraculously, he was still alive. He couldn't feel his hands or feet. Luck ran out when he saw a group of people in mixed clothing and carrying an array of weapons rush toward him, shouting in a language he didn't understand. He blacked out. When he came to, every joint and muscle screamed. Moving was agony. A man with a gray shirt under a black coat was eating bread nearby. Tony turned his head with difficulty. "Don't move," the man said in accented English. "If the wound opens again, you'll be in trouble." "Where is this? Who are you?" Tony tried to sit up. His body refused. The man shrugged. "Relax, Mr. Stark. I don't know where we are. I only know you're alive, and so am I." He stood, took a cup, fetched some water, and helped Tony sip. The water eased Tony's thirst and dulled the edges of the pain just enough for him to take stock. "Thank God you woke up," the man said, smiling for a moment before remembering his manners. "I'm Wu Bai. We met in 1999. You might not recall." Tony forced a smile. "If you remind me again later, I might remember," he muttered. The line felt absurd even to him. After everything, he'd forgotten plenty of things about this life. Dr. Wu, because that's what he was, a cardiologist pressed into field surgery, answered Tony's unasked question. "They use me as a surgeon here." "So we're in the hands of terrorists?" Tony asked flatly. Dr. Wu nodded, still chewing. "This place is remote. Your people will have a hard time finding you." Tony's eyes scanned the room. A surveillance camera pointed directly at him. Dr. Wu explained it was to monitor Tony's condition and warned that others would be back soon. Sure enough, a flow of men returned, and with them a translator, Laya. Her face was bruised. She moved with a wounded professional calm. The man who had led the first questioning, the same one Tony remembered with a bandage around his head, led the procession. Two others, a bald man and a tall, sunburned man, flanked him like thuggish attendants. "Welcome, the famous Tony Stark, Merchant of Death," the leader said through the translator. He wore a practiced, oily smile. Laya played her role well. "You're in our hands now," the leader added. "What do you think about that?" Tony, propped on the narrow bed, flinched from the question, but not from his pride. "I don't think much of it," he replied, voice steady. "If you don't understand, we can make you understand," the leader went on, cold and amused. "We have plenty of ways to clear your mind." He signaled to his men. Dr. Wu stepped forward. "You can't. He's not healed enough. If you torture him, it will kill him." The leader hesitated only briefly. Take him, he said. Two men dragged Tony out of the tiny room. He was tossed onto a new bed about an hour later. The leader's parting command, "Save him," was more a threat than an order. Dr. Wu went back to work, doing what he could with ragged tools and threadbare supplies. To his surprise, Tony's original injuries were healing faster than expected. If not for the new damage, the wounds from the blast and the transport, Tony might have been up and moving within a week. The discovery brought no joy, it only underscored their helplessness. Dr. Wu sighed and kept treating him. Tony's recovery was painfully slow. Waking each afternoon, dependent on others for the smallest needs, hollow with pain and humiliation, he sank into a darkness he wasn't used to. He even briefly toyed with the thought of letting Dr. Wu do him a mercy he hadn't asked for. But Dr. Wu refused emphatically and instead kept bracing him with stern talk and bowls of chicken soup that tasted shockingly like kindness. Tony, worn down, responded to that kindness. He complied with the treatment, and after 7 or 8 days he could finally sit up and handle small things himself. His relief was short-lived. The captors invited him out of the cave. They led him into an open area and halted. Before him was an arsenal, men with the most advanced small arms and launchers, racks of things that made Tony's stomach go cold. Scattered across the lot were weapons bearing the clean white Stark Industries logo, the tools he made for nations and markets, now in the hands of men who would use them for their own causes. The leader stepped forward. Pride flushed his face. "What do you think of these?" he asked. Tony looked over the weapons with a hollow calm. "You've got a lot of Stark Industries hardware. We're your biggest customer, apparently." The man returned. "We brought you here because we heard your company has a new missile system." He tapped a photo clipped to a clipboard. "Help us build this Jericho missile system, the one in the picture, and we'll let you go." Dr. Wu's face didn't change. He sounded flat and certain. "He won't." Tony watched the exchange. Then he smiled, an easy, practiced smile, and reached out to shake the leader's hand. It was the right move outwardly. The smile and the handshake said agreement, cooperation. Inside, the smile didn't reach his eyes. He'd learned how to play people, and he would play them now. Chapter 42. Escape Plan. They'd given him a deadline. The kidnappers wanted the weapon finished and delivered fast, so even though Tony's injuries were far from healed, he pushed himself to find a way out. He already had a plan in his head, one that required skills he didn't have. That meant he needed someone who did, Dr. Wu, the surgeon who'd been treating him. "How did you end up here?" Tony asked, keeping his voice light. Dr. Wu's face tightened. "I was in a small village not far from here, doing free heart surgeries for the children. Then a missile, one developed by Stark Industries, fell right into the village. It turned everything into hell. When they found me and some Red Cross colleagues, they arrested us." Tony read the subtle change in his tone and guessed the worst. "Your colleagues." "After I brought you out," Dr. Wu said softly, "they probably couldn't wait for the Red Cross to respond. They went on a killing spree." He let out a breath that sounded more like an apology than anything else. He was alive, but the others who'd volunteered with him were gone. His luck felt like a curse. Tony didn't know how to respond. He'd seen the terrorists' weapons and recognized the Stark logo on most of them. He couldn't deny his part in making the technology, but it felt wrong to claim responsibility for this slaughter. "It's not your fault, Tony," Dr. Wu said after a moment. He smiled faintly. "I can tell the difference between Stark Industries and Tony Stark. Besides, if you were behind this, you wouldn't be talking to me now. I think the reason I'm still alive is because you exist." "If you say so," Tony deflected, cracking a weak joke. Then, quieter, "If I build that missile, that'll be the end of all of us." "Will any of your friends come looking?" Dr. Wu asked. "Friends?" Tony snorted. "Rhodey might be trying to find me, but aside from that, I don't have many friends," he shrugged. "Doesn't sound promising." Dr. Wu listened, then said, with a steady pride, "I'm not worried about me. I am here because I'm Chinese. China will not abandon its citizens." Tony raised an eyebrow. "You think the government will send an army over one missing doctor?" "Maybe the United States wouldn't," Dr. Wu answered, "but we won't abandon any of our people." Tony cut the subject off. He didn't want to argue about policy. "We can't just sit and wait, and I'm not building Jericho for them." On that we agree, Dr. Wu said. We can't build a weapon that powerful. But he added quietly, we can't just do nothing either. If we stall, someone might come for us. Tony smiled under his breath. Good. Then we'll do something else first. I need your help. What do you mean? Help with what? Dr. Wu asked, curious. Something that can power a city for weeks or keep a big machine running for 20-30 minutes, Tony said confidently. Dr. Wu blinked. What is it? The arc reactor. If you've paid attention to Stark Industries, you know we make giant reactors. I've built a miniature one before. Tony started unfastening the head of one of the missiles they'd brought into the cave. I need you to help me take these things apart. You're sure you can fool them? Dr. Wu asked. It'll take both of us, Tony said, smiling. He knew bluffing the terrorists was the only way to get the space and materials they needed. Tony played his part well. He convinced the captors he needed a large clear area and heavy materials to test components. They were eager for progress and vacated the largest chamber in the cave. They supplied steel, tools, and even hauled in more missiles from the outside. With the space and parts in hand, Tony and Dr. Wu set to work. What's the plan? Wu asked as Tony began disassembling missile components. Strip them down for the palladium and other rare parts, Tony said. He moved quickly and efficiently, taking apart one casing after another. He extracted small cells and jagged bits of metal, then focused on shaping the heart of what he needed. Tony had to be careful. The work was delicate and precise, taken on with his injured hand. He kept warning, be careful. If we mess this up, our raw materials are lost and they'll get suspicious. Tony, hush, Dr. Wu replied, but there was no scolding in it, only focus. I'm a chief surgeon in cardiology. My hands are steady. When Tony's injury made some of the final precision tasks impossible, Dr. Wu took over and performed them with the same calm surety he used in an operating theater. Under their cooperation, the arc reactor began to take shape. A compact, humming core built from scavenged missile components and a small ring of palladium. For a while, it felt like a miracle. They had the pieces, they had the reactor's basic frame, and they had each other. But as the complex task proceeded, friction grew. Dr. Wu was a brilliant surgeon, but physics and weapons engineering weren't in his wheelhouse. Damn it, something's off, Tony muttered thin, hands flying across blueprints he'd sketched. Wu, you have to understand, we're depending on this. I'm not a physicist, Dr. Wu snapped, setting down a wrench. He had reached his limit. Do you think I can read your formulas like I read an EKG? Tony bristled. If my hand wasn't wounded, I wouldn't be making you do this. You can't even do a simple install. How is that possible? I start to wonder if you're even a real doctor. Dr. Wu's face darkened. Better than you, a weapons dealer. They fought like two proud men with too much at stake. Neither would back down first. The argument was ugly and childish, but it was also human. They both had so much pride invested in what they were doing. In the monitoring room, two of the guards were playing dice. They glanced over at the pair shouting, then went back to their game. What did two captive men quarreling mean to them? Nothing, as long as nothing exploded. Later, the man who acted as the little boss wandered in. He took in the scene and asked, "What's going on with them?" "Just the doctor and the other guy fighting. No big deal," one of the soldiers said lazily. Two men locked up together. What else would they do? The kid boss shrugged. "Don't sleep on it. Keep watching. Tell me if anything happens." He left it at that, unconcerned, and the dice rolled on. Chapter 43, S-Shield for Help. It was an ordinary morning. Jiangju had just finished tidying the tavern when he flicked on the TV to check on Tony. There was nothing new, no alarming reports, so he lost interest and turned it off. For Tony, whatever had happened before had felt like a second chance. Rare, precious. Jiangju set the thought aside and went back to polishing glasses. The bell over the door jingled. A familiar figure shuffled in, rubbing his one good eye as if waking from a long, troubled sleep. Nick Fury looked haggard but relieved to be back. "Morning, boss," he said with a tired smile. Jiangju kept polishing and grinned. "Still alive, then?" Nick's face flickered. He looked like a man who'd been through a rough patch. "Unlucky streak," he admitted. "More than 10 days. The first 2, I swear I nearly died. I felt like I did, actually. After that, it was a string of little disasters. No toilet paper when I needed it. A training gun misfired and blew a barrel. I slipped down some stairs, Stupid stuff. I thought I could fix things with money, but there's apparently no proper way to bribe my way into this tavern. He managed a wry half-laugh. Anyway, I'm back. Jiangju shrugged. Don't worry about last time. I'm not stingy. Nick shifted, suddenly earnest. I'm really sorry about that, but I have to ask a favor. Tony is missing. We've been searching for nearly a month, and we've found nothing. His father was one of the founders of S-Shield. We can't let anything happen to him. Jiangju put the glass down and listened. He's probably going through some critical challenge right now. Not in immediate danger, at least not from what I'd expect. He spoke calmly, as if assessing a familiar kind of crisis. Nick rubbed the bridge of his nose. Still, we want help. We were hoping the tavern could assist. Guests will decide, Jiangju replied. I already told you last time. You can entrust others here, but this place doesn't include me in the rescue party. Nick exhaled. He clearly accepted that. The last episode was closed. He took a seat and waited. The tavern filled in its usual way. Humans and monsters, mercenaries and mystics, even a few aliens drifted toward the bar. The crowd was noisy and colorful, exactly the sort of mix that made Nick take a long, thoughtful look around. He couldn't help but be impressed by the range of people Jiangju's place attracted. When the clamor had quieted, Jiangju clapped his hands once. All right, everyone, quiet down. I've got a job request from Nick Fury of S-Shield. The mission is to find one person and return him safely. Because it's strictly a rescue, I'm limiting this to 3 people. If you want in, raise a hand. Hands went up like it was recess. Lu Xiaofeng shot his up immediately. Sherlock waved a dismissive hand. I'm swamped with a case, Sherlock said. No extra time. Lu Xiaofeng lowered his hand reluctantly. I haven't been around in a while. I keep hearing about a world where Conan lives. My boss says murders happen there all the time, multiple in a day sometimes. Sounds unreal. He leaned toward Jiangju, half amused, half incredulous. If that's true, people there must be, well, plentiful. Sherlock snorted. Nothing like our universe, he said modestly. Jiangju was scanning the room as people spoke. He'd already mentally filtered the crowd. I've screened everyone here, he said. They're all capable. If you don't trust me, don't sign up, but I guarantee these folks can handle it. Nick raised his hand. Before you pick, what can S-Shield offer? Money? Equipment? Anything else? We can negotiate, Nick said. Money, resources, whatever's needed. Good enough. Jiangju nodded. There are a lot of hands. Choose 3. Nick hesitated. He didn't know who most of these people were. I don't come here often, he admitted. I don't know their abilities. You don't need to, Jiangju said lightly. I've already done the filtering. You just pick 3. Nick smiled weakly and pointed to 3 faces he'd seen before and remembered from prior briefings, partly because they were the ones he'd noticed. Jiangju laughed when he saw Nick's choices. You picked Lu Xiaofeng, Mengbo, and Ah Xing, he said. You sure you didn't just choose the ones who look the most familiar to you? Nick flushed a little. I picked what I recognized. Lu Xiaofeng straightened. I'll go, he said. I'm honored, but I'm not sure how much I'll help. I know people in cases, but this is a new world. You're still Lu Xiaofeng wherever you go, Jiangju said, smiling. Don't be modest. Mengbo, the city hunter, bristled at being left out of flattery. Excessive modesty is just false humility, he muttered from the side. Lu Xiaofeng ignored the jab. He was watching Ah Xing more closely, a young man with silver-gray hair and black pants and a white coat, standing casual but alert. There was a depth in his demeanor that suggested real skill. Brother Ah Xing, Lu Xiaofeng said, curling his fists in a gesture of camaraderie. Let's work well together. Ah Xing inclined his head slightly. If you're on the team, I'll do my best. Nick looked relieved to have a team. Jiangju folded his arms and surveyed the chosen 3 with a small, satisfied smile. The rescue would be entrusted to them. The tavern would remain the anchor point where orders, rewards, and gossip intersected. Tony's fate, for now, was in capable hands.